Hello, Jason. How does cloud security work? Um, Honestly, I asked that question to uh, I haven't specialized in cloud security, but I think our guest speaker today, he works on AWS stuff, if I'm not mistaken. I see him posing in front of a bunch of like Amazon Web Services like signs, so he might be part of the cloud security team. Don't quote me on that though. I might be wrong. But yeah, I haven't specialized in cloud security. I do web. Let me just check. I assume it's this field, AWS, Azure, and all that stuff is cloud, but I'm not even sure how cloud security works. I imagine DDoS attacks onto servers might be common. Yeah, like I did. Honestly, that's a good wake up call for me to start looking into. But like I know there's like a thing called leaky buckets, which I had like a little what was it? Like a little workshop at a conference once, and it's like AWS leaky buckets. Like if you're interested, maybe search that up. I think that's a pretty common. Let me see. AWS leaky buckets. Yeah, essentially leaky buckets are like AWS S3 buckets uh, that are a common source of data leaks. So it's a fun thing to look into because apparently a lot of people who use AWS have this issue and they're just like leaking a bunch of data that they use for their web services. Once again, I'm not super experienced in that. That might be a question for him. Yeah, it's a misconfiguration. Yeah. But I think by default, it's like all of like these buckets are like not misconfigured, but they lack the configurations by default. Anyways, it is 6:02. I will stop talking.
Okay, welcome everyone to Level Up with the CQ Security Bootcamp. So a little bit about us. We're one of the biggest student-run tech organizations in Canada. We are partnered up with universities across the country like McMaster, U of A, U of M, Dalhousie, UVic, etc. We work with tech clubs from different schools and help them out with resources, support, and connections. And here's a little overview of today's session. So we're gonna have our industry speaker, and then certificate requirements. Must complete 4 out of 5 sessions, must complete all the challenges within the deadline, 3 hours after the session it will be due. Must attain 80% average across all 4 out of 5 quizzes to pass. If you did 5, we will count your best 4. Just some bootcamp etiquette reminders. Please remain muted when facilitators are speaking. Ask questions in the chat during session and may raise hand to speak. during our Q&A session. Please maintain a level of professionalism while speaking to facilitators. Our sessions may be recorded or streamed live. For those watching through the live, they may ask questions in our Discord channel. And today your industry speaker will be Hazam Hamdan. He's a security engineer at Amazon. And you guys already know Lucas, and I'll pass it off to him.
All right. Hey guys. So welcome to session 4. Yeah, it's session 4. And today is a pretty exciting one, but quite a difficult one. And I'll explain why in a second while I share my screen. I'll just do my entire screen. All right. And I'll do this one straight off the bat. All right. So before I talk about anything, just a quick recap about session 3, which was our last session. So we talked a bit about password security, two-factor authentication, browsing, tracking, and extension hygiene. Basically just overall like cybersecurity hygiene, right? But personal security is only just the tip of the iceberg. And today we're going to talk or peek behind the curtain into what happens behind the scenes of a network and how attackers actually, some simple attacks that attackers use to move through it or to actually, sniff on you. And yes, that is a real security term, and we'll talk about it this course. So now about today's agenda. So we're going to start talking about IPs, ports, and protocols, firewalls, and network segmentation. We're also going to talk about packet sniffing and traffic analysis. So yes, that's the word sniffing there. And then we're going to talk a bit about lateral movement and attack progression, as well as give you guys a bit of tools and resources, like always, so you guys can learn a bit on your own. And then a bit of a career tie-in on some different positions within the cybersecurity that you can actually use networking security. And then, of course, our industry speaker, the exciting bit that will happen around the end. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so now starting off, so before we can protect the network, we need to understand how it works underneath, how data moves, how devices talk, and how attackers exploit that flow. And this starts with 3 core concepts, which is IP addresses, ports, and protocols. So starting with IP addresses. So what are IP addresses? So a few of you might have actually heard the term, but don't know exactly how they work, why, where they're from, how they're created. So essentially IP stands for Internet Protocol, and every devices, so phone, computer, printer, Xbox, essentially has one if they're connected to a network. And it's essentially like it's your mailing address. It's your digital mailing address, so the internet knows where to send your data. And there are 2 types of IPs. There are public IPs. So these are the addresses that the internet sees. So they're assigned to you by your internet service provider, also known as ISP. And fun fact, if you want to see what your IP is right now, you can actually visit whatismyip.com. If I don't know if the council will put that in the chat, but for also the technical ones out there, you can also in PowerShell, or I think both command prompt and PowerShell, you can do IP config, and you can see your current IP. And then there's also private IP address. So these are used inside of local networks, so inside of your homes, offices, and are assigned by your router using DHCP. Which is Domain Host Configuration Protocol, which is essentially a protocol that automatically assigns you an IP. So there are 2 versions of IPs, right? There's IPv4. So these are the common IPs that you'll most likely see. They have kind of 4 octets. So 192, or is it octets? Anyways, it starts with 192.168.0.1. This is an example of an IP address. It doesn't always look like this. It can be 172.0.0.1, whatever the case is. And it looks a bit like this. And there are about 4.3 billion possible IP addresses. The issue is that our population is getting a bit more bigger than that at this point. So there's a newer version of IPv6 that isn't fully implemented yet in today's world. that looks a bit like this. It's a lot longer and a lot harder to kind of understand, but it supports trillions of addresses. So once we fully run out of IP addresses, we'll start using these. Yeah, just for a quick interaction question, do you guys know, okay, for all the techies out there, all right, do you know what the IP 127.0.0.1 means? Okay, don't search it up, right? It's a special IP. I will say that in the chat. Local, yeah, Nate got it first. Or no, Jason got it first. Yeah. So it's essentially just like a callback IP that essentially just refers to yourself. It's not your IP address. It's just an IP address that, when you use it, it's essentially just referring to yourself. So yeah. Now moving on to network ports, right? So we talked a bit about IPs. So think of IPs as kind of like your home address on the internet, right? So now what are ports, right? So a network port is like a door on your computer that helps it talk to different services on the internet or a network. So for example, when you visit a website, your computer knocks on, for example, port 80 or port 443, and asks for the page. Different ports are used for different tasks as well. So when I mentioned port 80, that's HTTP, and then 443, that's the port for HTTPS. And we learned last time that these are protocols for internet traffic, right? Remember, HTTP is not safe, HTTPS very safe, or a lot more safe, I guess. Yeah, each port is often tied to a different service or program. So for example, as you can see here, 80 is tied to HTTP, 443 is tied to HTTPS, 22 is tied to SSH, blah, 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 blah. And these are a few examples of some of the reserved specific ports on services. But what this might seem a bit cryptic now for those who are less, knowledge in computer science, but all of these acronyms that you see here are actually protocols. So now you might be wondering, okay, ports, are they numbers? Are they ports, or are they protocols? Like, why are there protocols for ports? And I'm glad you asked. So essentially, what protocols are, they are think of it this way, because ports are just doors, right? But we need protocols to decide what kind of data goes through each door and how to handle it, right? So more in-depth definition is, once you've got access, once you have your address, which is your IP, and your door, protocols decide how the data is exchanged. So network protocols, by definition, are standardized rules and conventions that allow computers and devices to communicate with each other over a network. And they define how data is formatted, transmitted, received, and processed. And essentially, these protocols ensure reliable, efficient, and secure communication between different types of devices, regardless of differences in hardware or software. So, and also a good thing to note here, there's such a thing called open ports. So remember how I mentioned that port, or, oh, do I have this in the wrong section? I have that in the wrong section, sorry. So open ports, okay, just to keep in mind, we mentioned how ports are similar to doors, right? If you have an open port, it's essentially as if you're saying that the service that is accessible through that port is active and is actively listening for incoming connections, right? So where does this, where am I getting to right now, right? But before I kind of give you guys a big example of what IPs and protocols and ports come into play, especially in terms of cybersecurity, let me mention this first, okay? So there are different types of protocols, right? And they all are used for different purposes. Number one is HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Like we learned, that's the protocol that's used for internet traffic, for transferring web pages. Then there's TCP, which stands for Transmission Control Protocol. And its purpose is to ensure reliable and ordered delivery of data between devices. For those who may know, there's also a thing called UDP, which is essentially just the very fast but clumsy version of TCP, which that protocol is often used like what we're doing right now. We're in a live call. It uses the protocol UDP because to be able to display information on your screen live very fast, you need your packets or your traffic to be transferred or transmitting very, very fast. So if you have a very safe and reliable version, it might not, it'll be a bit slow. But if you use UDP, it's very, very fast. You might lose a few packets, but it'll make your live feed come in way more faster. But I would suggest searching a bit more on that, because TCP and UDP is a whole separate beast in networking. But yeah. And then there's FTP, which is File Transfer Protocol. And its protocol is essentially used for transferring files. So say a computer wants to transfer files to you, they're going to do so by the FTP port. And then there's SSH, which stands for Secure Shell. Its purpose is to provide secure remote login and command line access. And then finally, SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Its purpose is essentially to send emails from like a client or a server. So essentially, when you send an email, okay, the type of traffic or the protocol that is used to do so is SMTP. So now you might be thinking, what does all of this have to do with security? I'm talking about IPs, ports, protocols. Okay, that's networking. What does that have to do with security? So the answer is because if your doors are left unlocked, right? Like, remember, ports are kind of like doors. Attackers can walk right in, because attackers can often scan for open ports using tools like Nmap, where essentially open ports are like entry points, and every open port is a potential risk for the device that has those open ports. So to give you guys an example a bit of what that looks like. So right here's like an example of how attackers can use ports and protocols to essentially attack your device. So as you can see right here, here's a screenshot of someone using an Nmap command. And essentially Nmap is a very, very popular network mapping tools, and is used for network discovery, to discover what type of devices are on a network, what type of ports are open on them. But in this case, it can be used maliciously. So as you can see here, the command up here, nmap-pn or -si, blah, 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 -p80, blah, 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 blah. Essentially what this is doing is, as I've summarized here, it's essentially an Nmap scan to scan ports 80, 21, 22, 443 on the target 172.31.99.2. Okay, that's the IP address. These are the ports that might be open on it. And then the output of it, Nmap says that on that IP, there's the FTP port open, there's the SSH port open, port 22, there's the HTTP port open, and then there's HTTPS open. So that means that this computer, okay, is expecting or is actively, listening for connections on these ports, right? So how exactly does an attacker take advantage of this, right? So for one, remember how I mentioned how SSH is used to provide a secure remote login and command line access to a device? So I'm actually going to give you guys a quick demo on how this can be exploited. All right. So if you guys actually want to follow along with this challenge, once again, this challenge is completely optional. But this right here, okay, is a server that I'm going to try connecting to through SSH, right? So let me just go to my terminal. Okay. I hope you guys can see this. So right now I'm in my terminal. I'm on my own personal computer on my desktop, right? All good. So essentially what SSH is, okay, you can use it as a command. And what you can use it for is to connect to other devices remotely, but as if, you're logged in as in that device in your terminal, right? You can take over a device by using this. So say, for example, I scan a device, like that IP, and it says that port 22 is open, right? That means I can try connecting to it. So let's do that right now. So I'm going to do SSH, okay? And then I'm going to state what's the profile or the username of the device I'm trying to log into. So in this case, there's actually, let me show you guys really quick what I'm talking about. So essentially the challenge I'm referencing, okay, some of you might know this, but it's essentially a bandit challenge, okay? And it's essentially challenge you to SSH into this specific domain using port 2220 on the username bandit0, okay? So let's do that. So we're gonna do SSH, okay? And then, let me see. So yeah, we're gonna do SSH and then bandit 0. Okay, that's the username. And then the domain is bandit, or the host, sorry, labs.overwire.org, right? So when you're SSHing, what you can do is after the @ it can either be an IP or just a kind of like a website URL. This will be resolved to an IP eventually, but for this is the only server that I know that I can actually SSH to for this demo. So that's why I'm just using this. And now we have to state what port we're going to use. So now you'll be asking, okay, SSH, didn't you say that's port 22? Yes, but you can actually configure what certain ports are listening for what type of data. So in this case, okay, this device, okay, bandit 0 on bandit.labs, blah, 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 has set their SSH, listening for SSH on port 2220. Okay, I actually typed this in wrong. Port 2220. Okay, so now what happens when I press enter? Okay, what's gonna happen? Oh, look at this. It's asking me for a password, right? So we've talked a bit about password security, right? And we know that if you reuse passwords or you have very short and poor passwords, it's not good, right? So what if this device, right, is using a bad password for its SSH connection? What if its password is the same as its username? So I'm going to type in bandit 0. It's not going to show up on the screen because that's just how the terminal has it set up. And let me press enter. Okay, cool. I'm in. So for those who don't know, essentially what I just did, I SSH connected to another device. So right now, I'm connected. I'm taking over another device through SSH. As you can see right here, this is no longer my computer. This is a whole different folder. I can navigate through that computer. This is their home folder. Look at that. I'm in a completely new computer. So see how that works? Essentially, I was able to see, like, through Nmap, I would be potentially able to see whether they have SSH working. And if they do have if they do have SSH open, then I can do something like this where I can remotely connect to it. And see, all that's holding me back from connecting to a device completely is a password, right? So keep in mind, this is just like a lab environment. This is not a real device I just hacked into. Well, yeah, it technically is a real device that I hacked into, but it's ethical. It's an online demo that someone's hosting online. So yeah, that's a little demo of how people use open ports and certain types of protocols to hack into devices and gain access to other devices. So now going back to the presentation. So hope you guys enjoyed that. If you guys want to learn more about this challenge and if you guys want to attack this device, follow this URL. So now let's move on. So essentially what I want you guys to all take from this is the following analogy. So essentially IP addresses are like the building, the address of your device on the internet. The ports, okay, are like the door to the room or the service you're trying to access. Protocols are the delivery methods or the communication style. So for example, like an email, phone call, walkie-talkie, etc. Essentially basically how the data is handled. So now, how can we protect our systems and ports from being exploited like this, like how I just did? And you would do so by using a firewall, right? So essentially what a firewall is, essentially now that we understand how data travels, how do we control what comes in or out of our networks? And that's through a firewall. And essentially firewalls are like the bouncers of your network. They monitor and control what comes in and out of your network. And they're essentially designed to prevent unauthorized activity or access to systems from within your network. Popular firewalls that you might have heard of are Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Cisco firewalls, and Fortinet. I personally have experience using Checkpoint firewalls, and they're great. They're actually the creators of the firewall, right? So, yeah, if you are in any type of position where you're doing network security and you're using firewalls, you'll likely be using these types of firewalls. Yeah, here's a pretty good, we already have a picture here of kind of what a firewall does, but here's a more improved analogy. So remember how I mentioned how they monitor and control what comes in and out of your network? So that includes, me trying to access that device I just did. Through the internet, I tried doing an SSH connection to a specific device. Where a firewall could have come in handy is block certain types of traffic from reaching that device. In this case, an SSH traffic, or just my IP altogether. Now, with all of this said, how do we actually tell firewalls, to deny or accept certain types of traffic, right? Because that's essentially what a firewall's job is to do, is to block, bad traffic from reaching your devices or your network altogether. And you would do so by using firewall policies. So they look a bit like this. So in most firewalls, they'll give you the options to enforce a certain type of policy, and you'll have to fill in certain types of information. So for example, you have a rule name called block malicious IP. This policy, so you would set it to deny, because remember, we're trying to block malicious IPs. So we're going to set it to deny. Then we need to state what type of source IP we want to deny, and it would be this malicious IP. Then destination IP would be any, right? Because we don't want this IP to access any of the devices on our network. Protocol would be any, but if we wanted to, it could be SSH, for example. Port is any, and then direction is inbound. So that means any traffic that's coming from the internet into our network, that's inbound traffic. So it's essentially saying if any IP is requesting or trying to do things, reach my network, cancel it, block it, deny it. Then there's another example here where you would allow certain types of traffic. So for example, allowing web browsing. So lots of companies often have this. So essentially what we're doing here is we're allowing, and then source IP. So essentially what we're stating here, okay, is 192.168.0.0 and /24. So essentially what this means is it's a range of IPs, also known as a subnet mask. And it's essentially what helps identify what IPs are part of a network. So it's essentially saying, once again, I really wish I can go into more details about this, but networking is a huge beast. So that's why, if you guys don't know what a subnet mask is, we have a link at the end of the course for you to learn more about it if you don't understand what it is. Essentially it's saying that within the IPs of a certain range, so it can be like 192.168.0.1 or .2, .3, .4, whatever. Whatever IPs try to access the internet or use HTTP, allow them. And of course, it is outbound. So anything inside of our network that's trying to go outside of our network, you would allow it. So this is essentially what you tell firewalls, or where you input inside of firewalls, and that's what you tell them what to deny or to allow into your network. So that's how, I guess you can see how a firewall would have protected against the attack I just did. I basically just directly walked into a device that had no security setup at all, with poor password security, but also nothing preventing me from SSHing into the device. So now there are multiple types of firewalls. So I'm not going to go into detail about every single one, but there's packet filtering firewalls. So these essentially inspect individual packets and allow or blocks them based on predefined rules. So like I mentioned, IP, ports, protocols. There's circuit level gateways, which monitor TCP handshakes and sessions to ensure valid connection without directly inspecting packet contents. And then there's also things like packet level gateways, stateful inspection firewalls, next generation firewalls. There's a whole bunch of them. And I would look further into them if you guys are more interested in network security. Another thing to keep in mind about firewalls is that there are different types of delivering firewalls, or to set up firewalls. So there's hardware-based firewalls. So you'll often see these in your internship companies or whatever company you work at, really. It's essentially a big physical network device, essentially like a server that acts as a firewall, okay? And these would often be in server rooms where the whole device's job is to act as a firewall, right? And these are very, very powerful, used for industrial purposes. Then there's software-based firewalls. So these are things that you'd often download on your own computer. So for example, Windows Defender, I believe they have a type of firewall. So this would often be directly installed on your own personal device. Whereas if a hardware-based firewall is, like we mentioned, it's a whole separate device that whenever traffic is passed through your network, it passes through the firewall first and then to your device, right? Similar to how software would work, but the firewall would actually live inside of your laptop. So the traffic would pass through it first and then to whatever, service it's trying to access. Then there's cloud-based firewalls. So I think it was Shiv who asked a bit about like cloud security, but there are cloud-based firewalls. So it's essentially just firewalls that are hosted in the cloud, offering for like scalable protection for distributed networks and servers or services. Sorry. So yeah, that's one servers. Blah, blah. Brain is getting mixed up. So yeah, firewalls. That's one way that many organizations and also maybe some very, very, people actually have entire firewalls set up in their houses, like they're called home labs. Usually people in IT will do this because, they're really passionate about this stuff. So they would set it up in their own houses, but oftentimes you would see big firewalls in industrial settings. So that's one way that to ensure security on your networks. So what's another good way that, you can secure your network from attackers, right? It would be network segmentation. So essentially network segmentation is the practice of dividing computer networks into smaller separate parts called segments. And this essentially improves security. And this helps by first limiting access. So it only allows for certain users or devices that can reach specific parts of your network. I'll give an example in a second. And containing threats. So if a cyber attack happens on one part of your network or in one segment, it's harder for it to spread or transfer to another part of your network, right? So remember how we talked about worms, how their ability is to spread to different devices. They can, segmented networks can also help prevent against worms, right? But also for different types of attackers who are already inside of your network, trying to move around your network. But we will also talk a bit more about that in this course, or in this session at least. So one example of a segmented network is guest Wi-Fi's and home Wi-Fi's. So your house might already have this set up, but you've probably noticed that if you go to McDonald's or Starbucks, you've noticed that there's a guest Wi-Fi and then there's an employee Wi-Fi. This is essentially sort of like a segmented network because remember how we talked about last time how public networks are very, very dangerous, especially susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. That's why most of those attacks would go on in the guest Wi-Fi, isolated from home Wi-Fi or employee Wi-Fi, whatever type of network you want to isolate from anything that can potentially lead to a cyber attack, right? So here's a very like a better kind of visualization of what segmentation may look like. So you would have a network segment for just guest Wi-Fi. Then you would also have one for just general network. So whether that's like a network that you use for like internal like employees, something like PCI network or maybe IoT network for very, very big buildings. Believe it or not, like lots of their, AC or lighting systems are actually network devices themselves, and they communicate using what type of protocol would they use? Anyways, but like their one example would be Zigbee products. They make very good like IoT like smart systems. So you would have an entire segment dedicated to IoT devices because say, for example, if an attacker is able to hack into your light system, right, which is possible, they wouldn't be able to actually reach, the people in your guest Wi-Fi or the people in your general network, right? So that's kind of the idea of network segmentation. So yeah, now let's talk about one of the coolest and most powerful tools that defenders and attackers use. And that is packet sniffing. So like I mentioned, funny word, but essentially what packet sniffing is that, or essentially what a packet is first, because I don't expect you guys to know what packet sniffing is without knowing what a packet is. But essentially all traffic in the internet is made of packets, which are essentially tiny chunks of data sent between devices, which can include the data being sent, where it's going, and also where it came from. So that's like, the destination IP, the IP where it came from, the data that's within it. So that's essentially what a packet is. So by doing packet sniffing, okay, you are actually or essentially listening, okay, to the different types of or the data that is going on within a certain type of communication. That said, there are packet sniffers like Wireshark that can actually capture and analyze these packets and allow to analyze the contents. So that is essentially packet sniffing. And it's essentially like listening to every conversation in a room. And this could be useful not only for hackers to spy on people, but also for people in IT who want to debug a system. Like, say, for example, if you have your computer who's trying to communicate with like a a network switch or a certain type of network device, and there's some type of communication issue, you can use Wireshark to actually inspect the packets of their communication to see like, hey, what errors, like, when did they happen? Who are they coming from? Is it coming from them? Is it coming from my own computer? You can use that for IT and debugging, right? But once again, you can use packet sniffing for illegal purposes. So, of course, if you can do packet sniffing, but just because you can do packet sniffing doesn't mean that you should. It is very illegal. Any type of spying on anyone is illegal. So so keep that in mind. This applies to almost every single cybersecurity or penetration testing concept. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's legal to do so. Say, for example, if you buy a hammer, there are a bunch of legitimate uses for hammers. You can use it on your own house. You can use it to build your own stuff. But if you start running around with a hammer in public, telling other people, "Hey, let me use my hammer on you," that wouldn't be good, right? So only use these types of things if it's on your own stuff and you know what you're doing. So and essentially when you're doing packet sniffing, right? So remember how we talked about HTTP and HTTPS, and how HTTP, it has unencrypted traffic, right? Essentially where the traffic is in plain text. You can just read it with your own eyes, where HTTPS is encrypted. So if you were to do packet sniffing, you wouldn't be able to tell what's going on. So oftentimes when you are doing packet sniffing on unencrypted traffic, you can see things like login info from HTTP sites, DNS queries, and device info, cookies, and session tokens. But so now you might be wondering, how exactly does packet sniffing look like? I just put a few bullet points and you don't really understand what exactly packet sniffing is. So I actually have a video right here. I wish those notifications were going off. So I have a video right here by Network Chuck that we're going to watch, and he's going to demo him doing a packet sniffing attack. And Network Chuck is one of my favorite YouTubers of all time. He's taught me most of what I know about networking and network security. So we're going to actually watch him do a packet sniffing attack. And I'll explain what tools he uses, like Wireshark, and how he actually does it. So okay, so yeah, that's Network Chuck. So let me actually skip to the part where he does the attack. All right, so it starts right here. Okay. So essentially what he's doing right here, okay, I'm going to talk over him, is that he is using EtherCap. And EtherCap is a very well-known tool in penetration testing that allows you to do man-in-the-middle attacks. And if you don't remember from yesterday, man-in-the-middle attacks are essentially when you position yourself between two devices, like in general. What he's doing here, though, he's putting himself between two devices within the same network. And that is his router and the phone of his wife. So right now in this video, he's trying to sniff the packets of his wife's iPhone, right? Of course, I'm sure he has permission to do that. But yeah, that's what EtherCap does.
Hey, I just want to let you know there's no sound.
Sorry?
We hear no sound. There's no audio output
Oh
on our end.
no. Oh no. Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, I can just show it off. Like, I can just explain it. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, essentially, the full command that he writes looks like this. So he's using ettercap, and ignore all of this. Essentially, what I want you guys to pay attention to is this IP address right here, which, remember, IP address is the net, like essentially the home address of a device on a network. This right here is his default gateway or his router. And then right here is the IP address of his wife. So now what he's going to do is intercept the traffic between both of these devices. And he's using ARP spoofing for this. Once again, there will be, I believe I put a link at the end to explain what ARP spoofing is, because that's a bit more advanced. But yeah. So I know you guys can't hear. Yeah. Right now, he ran the attack. So now, as you can see, the output, it's giving a lot of gibberish. You see there's a date here, blah, blah, blah. What all of this is, okay, is actually network traffic between his router and his wife's phone. So right now, his computer is actually receiving part of the communication, right? But he's not supposed to. So where does he go from this, right? Because now he's intercepting the traffic, but he can't actually see it. All of this is a bunch of gibberish. So what he uses next is Wireshark, like I mentioned earlier. So I'll just skip to that. Okay. So essentially, Wireshark will look a bit like this. I know it's a lot to look at, but essentially what you see here, this is traffic that Wireshark is picking up, communications that his computer is receiving or sending out. And essentially what he's going to do now that he's receiving the data from his router and his wife, he's going to try inspecting what that data is. And when he does so, okay, it looks a bit like this. Okay. So as you can see here, okay, I know once again, this is a lot, but right now he's filtering all the traffic that he has by IP address and then the IP that his wife's iPhone has. And then he's going to pick one piece or a packet, okay, and he's going to try reading it. Okay. So right now, this looks a whole bunch of gibberish, right? And that's intended. That's because the traffic is encrypted, right? So that's why it's important. If you're packet sniffing, okay, or an attacker is trying to do packet sniffing on you, if you have encryption, okay, they won't be able to see anything. But what happens on an unencrypted type of traffic? And remember, we talked about HTTP. That's unencrypted, right? So what does that look like? Okay. So I'm just going to skip it over to here, where he shows off all HTTP traffic, right? And he's just going to grab one certain type of traffic. Okay. And then here, bang. This is what I want to show you guys, right? So right now, okay, this is one packet that his wife was sending to the internet. And he's able to read everything, every single little bit of it. So for example, what website she's using it. So as you can see, http://www.surfsidetx. She can also see what she was requesting from that website. So get/upload, blah, 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 blah. Oh, .mp4. Oh, his wife was getting a video from that website. Interesting. And another thing that's interesting, you can also see what type of device that she's using. As you can see, iPhone OS 14. Isn't that crazy? So with this simple little attack that you just saw, that one command that you saw him run, okay, he's positioned himself between his router and his wife. So that means all the traffic that's coming from the internet to his router, then the router sends the data to his wife, he's going to receive all the data that his wife sends to the internet, he's going to receive. So now you can see how that is, how that can be quite malicious when used in the wrong circumstances. And attackers use this attack very, very often, notably on public Wi-Fis. That's why I mentioned last time that public Wi-Fis are very dangerous, because they can very easily just do packet sniffing and see what type of data you're seeing online. So a safe way to protect yourself is obviously if you see that your traffic is being sent through HTTP, that's a red flag. And of course, VPNs, right? So remember how we talked about VPNs and how they encrypt your data. That's good. Okay, so that's it for that little demo of Network Chuck. I suggest you guys watch more of his videos because he is genuinely a great YouTuber. and teaches a bunch more about network security and just networking in general. So yeah, so that was a little demo about packet sniffing. So now we've talked a lot about, we talked about packet sniffing, which is one type of attack that people can snoop on your network traffic. We've also talked about IPs and protocols and ports. So now, okay, remember how I was able to hack, or not necessarily hack, but connect myself to that device in my demo, right? So what exactly happens once an attacker gets into a device like I did, right? They don't just stop at one device, they move sideways across the network. And that's called lateral movement. And in simple terms, it's essentially when an attacker has already broken into one machine. So like I did. So when I logged into Bandit 0 through SSH, I logged into that machine. That can either be through just, people being ignorant over their open ports and allowing people to just directly walk through, or, for example, malware. If malware gets downloaded on your computer and it opens a back door and allows an attacker to remotely connect to your device that way, they would be connected to your device. And now, since they're connected to that device, they're essentially, think of it, they're controlling a device that's within someone else's network, which means that they've gained access to that network, right? So that's why lateral movement is important for attackers, because once they're inside of that network, they can try to snoop around and see what other devices are on that network that they can try connecting to. Maybe devices that are, that have admin privileges. How can they hack into those devices as well? So it's essentially the goal of lateral movement is that once they're inside of their network on a device that's been infected or just had poor, configurations, their goal is to try to move around in that network to reach high value assets, privileged accounts, or sensitive data. All right. So how exactly does this play out, right? So this is a lot of data, but don't worry, I'll kind of go through it. So this is exactly, or not exactly, it does change from time to time, but this is an example of how an attacker, okay, would kind of move around a network once he's inside of it. So starting with number one is initial access. So this is usually done through phishing, malicious download, or exploiting or an exposed service, right? So remember, malicious download, that can be a malware that opens a back door, or just an exposed device, like I showed you, an SSH connection that has a bad password. I was able to just walk right in. I have accessed the device I want to attack. Then it's establishing a foothold. So essentially, attackers would install a backdoor or remote access tool or a RAT like Cobalt and Strike, Meterpreter, or AnyDesk. I haven't used AnyDesk or Cobalt, but I have used Meterpreter through Metasploit. But yeah, like it's essentially once they've gained access to this device, they're going to try to make sure that they have a way to come in and out of that device whenever they want. So whenever they leave or they come back, they have a way in. Then it would be credential dumping. So now they're on a network, right? And they have other devices on that network, right? And they want to try to access those devices, see what more they can discover, see what other devices have access to, have admin privileges, right? They can use something like credential dumping by using a tool like Mimikatz, which pulls saved credentials from memory. And then what they'll do is network discovery, right? So remember how I mentioned earlier how Nmap was used to see what open ports were open on a specific computer, right? That's what they would often do once connected to that specific device. And it looks a bit like this. I'm going to go back in a second to explain the rest, but this is essentially what what it looks like. So as you can see here, he's running an Nmap scan. So sudo, so he's running this with root privileges, nmap-sn, and then 172.
Bunch of little tasks in each realm of cybersecurity, but really choose what you want to do. And so that when it's time to do these bigger projects that are supposed to go on your resume, you don't waste your time doing stuff that isn't relevant to what you want to do. What do you think that till what year or time in uni you should be fluent in coding? So it depends what you want to go into. If I want to do application security engineering, or if I'm doing software engineering or blue team, I have to always be fluent in coding. There's no way around that. But if you're going to do like cybersecurity analyst role, you just need to know security concepts. And honestly, coding is not really that big in the role. You know what I mean? So you don't really need to know, you don't never need to be fluent in coding. But if you want to do something that's coding based, in cybersecurity, then you need to know coding always. What has been the most challenging period / task that you've been given during your career? Let me think. That's hard. So I think the most challenging. So obviously I can't leak the projects I work on, right? But I'd say like the projects that are the most difficult are the ones where they ask you to make something. Imagine you want to like find something that does the solution. Now, like imagine on Google, and so like say you're at a company that like helps, it doesn't come up with crazy. You know what I mean? Because you have to like create something and make the solution out of nothing. But those are like the harder tasks. But you know, typically in cybersecurity, especially entry level, they're not going to ask you to make something out of nowhere. You know what I mean? They're probably going to ask you to like make sure that the stuff they're already working on is working right, or like, okay, we have this part of this app, you know, make sure it's secure, something like that. You know what I mean? They're not going to ask you to create something out of thin air. That's more like a senior level, or if you go into security engineering, that's like pretty much what you always do. So, should I start making projects in my first year, or if I wait till second year, it will be fine as well? Why wait until your second year? If you always say like, oh, I'm going to do projects my second year, I'm going to do projects my third year, I'm going to do a project next week, you're never going to do it. I'm not going to lie. You're never going to do it. Like just literally find the project on YouTube. If you want to follow a YouTube tutorial, do it. If the YouTube tutorial is an hour, then do like one minute of it a day for like, just do it now. You know what I mean? Like realistically after this, it's the weekend. What are you going to do? Like go out, watch TikTok, doom scroll, brain rot, like just go and start doing the project. Like you have nothing to stop you. You know what I mean? If you keep have coding knowledge and it can be fully coding based sometimes. So, what's your take on P2P protocols like BitTorrent? While they're great for sharing data, also get used for a lot of piracy. Honestly, I don't know too much about that. Might have to answer that. I might have to look into that later. I don't want to give you like a wrong answer or something. Let's see. When you were stuck at the project and couldn't get the help you want on Google, what did you do to break that phase? Wow. Ask other people. Believe it or not, when you guys are at a company, you're not on your own. Like I think people think like when you work at a company, you have to have knowledge of everything and know everything at once. You really like you don't. You're not on it's a team. Keep in mind you are on a team at a company. It's not like you're a solo engineer. So when you're there, you can ask other more experienced engineers for advice on stuff that they might know that you don't. You know what I mean? And they can definitely help you problem solve. If they give you an impossible problem or something that's not done before, like you don't have to be like Einstein and be on your own. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have a team of people with different expertise that can all come in and help you make a solution for it. So let me see. I have 6 assignments due tomorrow. Well, okay. After you do the 6 due tomorrow, do on Sunday? Interesting. Okay. Do you use AI in your workflows? At companies, they awesome. And I think that's one thing that like sucks about school is that like they really hate when you use AI. But in companies, like their goal is to make the best stuff possible, the fastest possible. And so if you can use AI to do that, then yeah, obviously you can't don't put like, when you guys work at a company, don't put like sensitive information like ChatGPT. You know what I mean? Don't do that. You'll get fired and like you'll screw over your company. But you can use like Google, you can use help. It's not like a test where you can't use any online resources. You can use whatever you want to solve the problem. It's not a big deal. Now, can ChatGPT help you with the problems that your company asks you to solve? Not always. And that's what I'm talking about earlier. Like those are the hardest problems when like it doesn't exist online. But can it help you kind of for the steps to maybe solve it later? Yeah. What is the most hardware related role under cybersecurity? That's interesting. Hardware related is an interesting one. I would say that there are roles in companies, like for example, if you work at Toyota, right? Say I work at Toyota. Or no, I'll say Mercedes. I'll say Mercedes. Let's say you work at Mercedes. Mercedes has a self-driving function in their car, right? You can literally, like, Mercedes will have a role at their company where they give you like their console that goes in the car and their program, their computer, and they're like, okay, like try to, if you're a random person that has a car, can you hack into it and like play with the car settings? Like, can I change the mileage digitally on my car? Can I, maybe if they have like a speed limiter on the car, can I remove the speed limiter? Like, that is the more hardware cybersecurity stuff. You know what I mean? Or maybe a company will call you in, say like they have like an assembly line, they have robots making stuff. Can someone random dude come in and like destroy everything by plugging in a USB stick somewhere and like destroy it? Like, that's like the more hardware kind of side of cybersecurity. What language you use most in security engineering? So I'd say it differs. Like, companies, like I said, like when you do security engineering, it depends on the project you're working on. You know what I mean? If I'm working on something that is like, Java based, I have to do Java. If something is Python based, I have to do Python. But the language I like using the most when I have free will to do whatever I want is Python. Python is just the easiest for me to, understand. I used to be like, my first language I ever did was Java, which is a good language to start off with because it's like difficult. But, going into Python, I was like, oh my God, this is so much easier, so much better. So let's see. Advice to be better at communicating during an interview. Practice interviews with your friends. I would always do that. I would always go to my friends and, look up interview questions online from, there's websites online where people who do interviews will literally give you the questions that they did during the interview. And I go to my friends and I'd be like, ask me this. And then they'd assess my answer. And people would always do that with me because, listen, you're going to have one guy in your university who's passed an interview, right? And even if someone hasn't passed an interview, you can know when someone gives a good or a bad answer. Like, at the end of the day, like, if there's a behavioral question, like, you have to follow like the STAR format, which is like situation, task, action, result. If you don't follow that, and if you don't have a good story and you're fumbling your words and stuff like that to your friend, how can you expect to do that to a random person? You know what I mean? So I recommend just doing it, just practicing with someone else. Sometimes I get stuck in codes. I ask ChatGPT to guide me to not tell. Yeah, like if you're like, some companies might not, but the majority of companies, like I haven't heard of a company yet that is like, you can't use ChatGPT. Don't put the company code in there, right? Like, don't put the company code in ChatGPT. So they're asking like, can I use AI at a company, basically? Like, you can ask it to help you with code, but just don't put the company code in ChatGPT or something. That's like not secure at all. I remember you could copy the frequency of a car using a flipper 0 for a little bit and unlock cars and even drive them too. I don't know if it was clickbait, but it makes sense too. No, you could. You literally could. I think like it was Hyundai and Kia where they didn't have like rolling codes on their cars, which means like basically how a car works is like when you click the button, it sends a custom code to the car to unlock it. And then the next time you unlock it, it's a different code. Kia and Hyundai did not do that. So every time you unlock the car, it'd be the same code. So if I just knew that code, I could unlock anyone's car. So that's what they had. And so it's true. You could. And so I guess that would be like a hardware security type of thing. Dude, Kia, you could use a screwdriver to open the car as if it was Kia. Kias were bad. Yeah, dude. Have you done an internship at Microsoft? Saw if you told us before, I missed it. No, I interviewed at Microsoft, but I ended up going to Amazon instead. I have a lot of friends that have interned there and have full-time jobs there. So I work at Amazon, and then I worked at Tesla. Let me see. Can you give tips? Tips for what? Tips for getting into Microsoft? I'm going to say like generally, you know what I mean? Like, know your security concepts, know your networking concepts, know your infrastructure concepts, and make sure you know behavioral questions. I'm going to be real with you guys. Like, before you even get in to the technical part of an interview, it always starts off with behavioral every time. So if you can't even pass the behavioral, you won't get to the technical. So make sure you're practicing those technical questions with your friends, those behavioral questions with your friends, and make sure that you actually can like speak fluently to someone without like stumbling on your words or just saying random stuff. Make sure you have a story planned for whatever question they could ask you. I'm not gonna lie, at the end of the day, like I've been asked like the same 5 questions every behavioral interview forever. They usually ask like, okay, if you have multiple tasks at the same time, what do you do? Or if like your boss is telling you one thing, but you know like the right solution, what would you do? Or like they ask you the same stuff every time. And you just have to have like a story for it that you just iterate over again and again. And then after that, you're going to want to do security questions as well. So then you get into the security concepts and the technical interviews, which, like I said before, are like CIA triad, networking concepts. They might ask you like one question I get so much for like networking concepts is like, how does DNS work? And that's very easy, right? But like, how does it work all the way like at every single little stage? You know what I mean? And once you really dig into it, there's like 5 different or 6 different steps that happen. And so like sometimes like they'll dig into you. So any skills you put on your resume, make sure you know them. Is there a leak code for those behavioral interview questions? So I wouldn't say there's a leak code for it. I would say that like so if you literally look up like Microsoft behavioral interview questions, I think on Glassdoor or like on one of these websites, they have like literally people will tell you the question that they've been asked, and a lot of them are the same. So you know what they're going to generally ask you. So that's my leak code for practicing interview questions. I just searched up a bunch of behavioral question and practice with friends. Glassdoor is usually pretty good about it. There we go. Literally confirmed in the chat. Bash or ZSH, and I mean the shell. Dude, I've used both, and I don't like either. I don't like either. Let's see. Oh yeah, someone just linked like Microsoft. They have their behavioral interview questions on there. That's crazy. Could you tell us your answer for the example you gave? What did you do if your boss is telling you to do something, but you know something else is right? So how you want to answer a question like that is give an example. So I'll be like, the situation was I was at work and I had worked on trying to break into our website, right? And I was successful in breaking into the website. And when I went to my boss to show him the results, he mentioned that my output was incorrect. And so at that point, I talked to him. I tried to talk him through what I did, and he had not agreed. And so what I would do then you have to talk about like the action that you did or whatever, right? I would say honestly in that situation is like go to other engineers and double check your work. People who have more reputation than you, because I'm not gonna lie, at the end of the day, guys, like if you're entry level, you're not gonna be. They don't have the trust in you yet. You know what I mean? So what you're gonna do is if your boss tells you like, hey, like I think this is something you missed, then you're gonna go back and show him do the thing that he said to do and show that you missed nothing. And also go to other engineers, show them your solution, and tell them like, oh look, like tell me if I miss anything here because the boss mentioned that I might have missed something here. And if they say no, then you can go back with not only the rep of the senior engineer, but also showing the boss that you actually took what he said into account and not just like, like shoved him off or something, and show that like, hey, I did what you asked and there's nothing there. So it's good that we checked it. And then he'll be like, oh my God, awesome. That's what you would do for that. Let's see. Lead code for practicing behavior questions with friends looks like a cool project idea. Yeah, yes, sir. If someone makes that, make a lot of money. Great startup idea. Did anyone who got internships at Microsoft, Amazon have a 3.5 or above? Was the first internship you had a big one, or did you have to build up internship / experience? I'd say the first experience I had was one that was literally unpaid. I literally like all they did was like, they flew me out to the place it was going to be at, but I didn't get paid to do any of the stuff I was doing. That's for it was like a competition. And that was with like John Deere, which is a Fortune 500. It's not necessarily like something huge. Actually, let me go back. Actually, I forgot the first ever internship experience I had before that was with my school. I think that's what I mean when I say like like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I work at Tesla right away or something. You know what I mean? Like my first internship was with my school. And schools have like jobs you can do, whether it's like something simple like IT, or maybe they have something cybersecurity related. Those are great for unpaid internship USA moment right there, bro. Jeez. Okay, listen, it paid off in the end. It paid off in the end. And there's, I mean, you can do an unpaid internship. That's like free experience. And that's like if you really, really can't find anything. But this was like a competition that I got flew out for. So I wouldn't say it's an internship, but the school one was that was an internship. Let's see.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Azam. We're gonna wrap it up right now. It's 8
Okay.
o'clock. So, yeah. Thank you, Azam, for everything, and thank you for your insights.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. If you guys want to ask more of these questions and, you know, get more advice on TikTok and stuff like, and on cybersecurity and stuff like that, check out my TikTok. It's at @zamham_. I'm sure like maybe they'll show it in somewhere here. But I have a bunch of resources on there that can help you guys kind of break into cybersecurity. If you guys have any advice, I also provide mentorship on there. If you guys want to schedule a call with me, we can talk more in depth about what you can actually do. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it talking to all of you. Yep.
Okay, so this is Azam's socials if you want to follow him. And